Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first webinar in our Celebrating Success series. We're extremely excited to be bringing you this monthly webinar series where we'll be talking to industry experts and care homeowners on how they've achieved success, and they'll be giving you tips on how you can do the same. Throughout the series, we'll be covering a number of different topics, from CQC regulations to interior design, customer service, and putting residents at the core of your business. And if you'd like us to cover any particular topics later on in the series, then please do let us know. Today we'll be talking about the road to outstanding, and we have two excellent speakers joining us. Please feel free to add your questions as we go through, and we'll be having a brief question and answer section after each presentation. Firstly, we'll be hearing from Ruth French, who's Operations Director at the award-winning Stow Healthcare Group. Stow Healthcare was established in 2010 and currently owns and operates 6 care homes, 3 of which are rated outstanding, which is an incredible achievement. Ruth has built up a reputation as a specialist in turning around failed care homes, and today we'll be giving some insights into the group's success and how they've put care at the heart of their service. Secondly, we'll be hearing from Andy Sleet. Now, Andy is a certified business coach with over 25 years of experience in helping businesses to establish effective leadership and achieving their goals. Today, Andy will be talking on the topic of leadership and giving some tips on how to create an effective team within a care home that will ultimately lead to better care to your residents. So with that, I'll now hand over to Ruth.
Thank you, Randall. Thank you very much for your kind introduction, and hopefully over the course of the next 10 minutes or so I can share with you some of my experiences over the last 10 years. I actually came to social care, I guess, from left field, really. My previous career was working as a civil servant in central London for a decade before taking on a failed nursing home based on our family farm, along with my mum at that point and also my brother, with whom I still work. None of us had any experience in care home management or social care. I'd barely stepped foot into a care home before that first day when we walked into the failed care home that had been run as a separate business on our family farm for around 50 years. But we often say that actually having that lack of experience in social care, we think, has actually stood us in really good stead, because we didn't know what things should be like. We just knew what we wanted them to be like. And I guess, 10 years later is quite a good point to reflect on all of the things that we've learnt over that time. Certainly, as we sort of headed a couple of years into that experience, I think we thought that we knew what we were doing at that point, and we felt we'd resolved quite a number of the problems that we'd inherited, including poorly motivated staff, many empty beds, pretty poor standards, and we thought we were motoring. And it just shows you how wrong you can be, because I've got very clear recollections of an unannounced CQC inspection at that point. And I think it was at the point really where CQC had changed their inspection regime, and it was moving away from that point where a inspector would come and sit and have a cup of tea with you and pat you on the hand and say, well done, you're doing a great job. And it became much more forensic. And it was on that inspection that I realised still how much we had to learn. And I often see that inspector now. She no longer inspects us, but we do see each other from time to time at different events. And I always tell her how life-changing that day was, because I never wanted to feel again how vulnerable I had felt on that inspection with her. And, she has said to me in the past, well, the difference, Ruth, between you and a lot of other providers is you wanted to learn and you wanted to get better. And she said, I've been and inspected someone else in Suffolk, and they had 5 goods all across their key lines of inquiry. And she said, do you want to think about some of the things you can do to be outstanding? And the provider said, no, thank you, I'm quite happy with good. Well, I can probably guarantee you now that that provider is no longer good, because I think the point that we all stop striving to be the very best we can is quite a dangerous one. So as Randall pointed out, we essentially take over homes with a history of failure. And usually that's around poor leadership and subsequently in their communities. So we always have a huge amount of work to do. And I think you can always turn that ship around with the right leadership and the right ethos. It's not an overnight job, but we have got quicker at what we do, and we have got better at what we do as we've learned. And ultimately, what I feel is your vision and your values have to permeate your home. So you have to be in that room even when you are not in that room, and you have to build a staff who absolutely share your passion and your drive and your vision for what you want that home to become. Way there will be casualties, and not all staff at the homes we take over make that journey, because not all staff want to work at the kind of standard that we expect. And that's okay with us. We need to wave goodbye to those staff as quickly as possible, understand who our blockers to progress are, and move on. So we have to make sure that our staff, our residents and their relatives have absolute confidence in our vision and in the care that is being provided in our homes. And that has been challenging for us over the last 12 months in particular, because it's made us think about some really different ways of having to operate. So some examples of things that we've had to do very differently in the last 12 months are learning to train a lot of our staff via Zoom, whether that's through training sessions that we as senior management team deliver, or getting external trainers to deliver training by Zoom as well. We've explored relatives meetings by Zoom and also staff meetings, and these have been really successful. I mean, I think in the past we've suffered a little bit from relative fatigue, and people can't really be bothered to turn up to a meeting at 6 o'clock in the evening on a cold, dark night. And actually our relative meetings through the course of the pandemic have been hugely successful, very well attended. And we've developed that as the pandemic has gone on. So for example, in our last relatives meeting, instead of having 6 separate meetings, so one for every home, we were actually able to move to a position where we had one relatives meeting where all of the senior management team were present, and then we got clever enough to put it into breakout rooms. So then a home manager mini meeting once we delivered all of the key messages. So we've learned a lot about different ways of operating. We've also done a lot in terms of remote quality assurance, which has been really effective for us. So it's because we were actually due this time last year to move to a whole new electronic care planning system, which we'd operated for around 4 years, but this was a new system. And this was going to be tied in also with compliance and also with EMAR. And we took the somewhat risky decision, despite the pandemic, to go ahead with all of those elements through the course of last year. And it actually turned out to be the best decision that we could have made, because there have been times through the last 12 months where we've not been able to have feet on the ground from senior management homes in outbreak, but we've still been able to keep a really close eye in terms of the quality that's going on in those homes. So the next thing I wanted to talk about really is innovation, and why innovation and how you evidence it has been so important to the success of Stow Healthcare. And the first thing I would say is you don't become outstanding by chance, and outstanding is not just about having a lucky day on the day of inspection. Outstanding is about how you build that body of evidence in the 2, maybe 3 years before that inspection ever takes place. And evidence is everything if you want to prove that you really are running an outstanding facility, or a, good across all 5 areas facility. So for a number of years now, probably since the point we took on our second home about 6 or 7 years ago, we've always worked to collate our evidence, and I'm sure a lot of you on this call do the same. So under each key line of inquiry, we gather our evidence constantly, and as a senior management team, we then review the evidence that each home is collecting. Is the evidence in that folder truly outstanding, or is it the run-of-the-mill stuff you would expect to see anyway? So we're always filtering things down to make sure we've got the best quality evidence in there. The other thing that I ask our home management teams to do, and we as senior teams support them in that, is really just developing a 1 to 2 page summary, again, organised by key lines of inquiry, bullet points. What are the truly outstanding things that your home has done since it was last inspected? So really promote that ongoing development and progress of your home and have that information there at your fingertips. It's usually one of the first things that we would hand to inspector when they arrive. It's also very important for homes to think outside of the box and then evidence the way that their creative thinking has been working. So, for example, we've recently had a resident move into one of our homes who's living with dementia. In his previous life, before he moved into our home, he was actually a very successful businessman, and he spent the first couple of weeks really quite frustrated in the home, and the team have been trying to do things to understand how we can help him settle. And I was delighted last week to find that this gentleman has now got his own desk in the home manager's office. He's got his own in-tray. He is supporting the home manager to complete daily walk around audits. He participated in 2 strategic meetings we had at the home last week. He participated in Zoom training that I was delivering, teaching line managers how to conduct one-to-one conversations with the staff that report to them. And actually he was able to contribute very effectively to that kind of training because it took him back to a lot of his working life, and he had some quite pertinent things to say. But it's not just about doing those wonderful things, it's about evidencing everything that we're doing. So does that residence care plan reflect all of those techniques we use to support him to live a really good life in our home? What happens at a weekend when the home manager's there and the office is locked? How are we supporting him out of hours? Another really good example at a different home is our residents usually go on a trip to Felixstowe to have their fish and chips and enjoy some summer sun. Let's hope we can do that again this year. But a couple of years ago, the home manager told me that she was going to buy a load of washing up bowls because they'd realised the previous year that not enough residents can get to the sea. So they decided to go and fill up the washing up bowls and bring those back. And then the next year, they thought, well, actually, we need to go even further than that, because what about the residents who are nursed in bed who can't get to Felixstowe? So what we're going to do is fill up a load of plastic bottles with the seawater and bring it back and decant that into a washing up bowl in their room so they can smell it and feel it and just taste that salt water that they would have got from their Felixstowe experience. So all of the time, it's just trying to develop your ideas and to evaluate what has worked. So, you know, in the evaluation that the activities staff did for that Felixstowe trip, they were able to talk about the impact of this salt water and what they'd done for the residents back at the home. And that evaluation piece then goes in your outstanding evidence file. Another really good thing you can do is just get one step ahead of the inspectors. So take, for example, the new CQC IPC inspections. We've had one of those recently. We got 24 hours notice. So as you probably know, at the moment, you might get 24 hours notice. If they've got no particular concerns, you might just get a call from the car park to say that we're here. But what we were able to do with 24 hours notice was, well, to be honest, we'd done it even before then, but the CQC have a template for all of the IPC related questions that they are going to ask you. we had already developed that into a COVID IPC audit that we put onto our system before Christmas. So management teams were already used to going through and answering those questions on a monthly basis. And then the day before CQC came in, we basically pre-populated their template for them, because they sent it to us saying, this is what we're going to ask you. So we wrote out all of our answers, evidenced everything that we were doing, and we sent it to them the day before. And the inspector joked, you've done all of our work for us. Well, it wasn't really a joke. We had done all of her work for her, and we got a great report out of it. So the final lesson that I would like to share with you is why to tell a story about your home or your company is so important. All of us have quality stories that are emerging from our homes on practically a daily basis. We just have to learn how to capture and tell those stories effectively. Probably about 6 years ago now, we started to feel like we were getting a bit of confidence. We knew what we were doing, and actually we learned there were things like award ceremonies out there for social care, and we thought, oh well, we'll have a try of that. Well, with our first nomination, we got a regional finalist. 6 years later, we've won 2 national awards for Care Group of the Year, and very many national winners for other categories, including care and nursing, lots of regional winners. And I think what's so important is making sure that your staff, residents and families feel part of that journey. So several months in advance of nomination time, we will put up boards in the homes, we will encourage nominations, and then myself and one of my colleagues, many evenings beavering away writing nominations. I mean, I think last year we probably wrote in the region of 40 to 50 nominations. We've probably got something like a 90% success rate in getting people shortlisted. You get better every time you do it. You just need to learn to tell your story effectively. And I think the other thing that you need to do is essentially become your own PR person. If you're not already in the habit of writing quick press releases on good things that are happening in your homes or in your company as a whole, it's a really good habit to get into, because in the space of 3 to 4 paragraphs and supplying the journalist with a quick picture, there aren't that many journalists out there who've got time to be heading around to care homes and finding stories. You've got to tell that story and really present it on a plate for them. Same goes for TV. I mean, we've been on TV 4 or 5 times in the last years. Most recently, last night, we were showcased on ITV Regional News with a 102-year-old resident busy doing yoga. You know, there's lots of good news stories out there. We just have to learn how to share them effectively. So I guess how I would sum up is outstanding single journey, and it's often really just a bus stop on that journey that you are making. Even when you achieve outstanding, what I'm trying to say is you've not made it, because the moment you take your eye off the ball and you start thinking you've got it perfect, you will lose something, you will miss something, and you will start falling. So it's about that constant drive to succeed and achieve and really provide the best lives for your residents in your homes. One relative said to me that what set the home that his mother lived in apart from anywhere else was the complete lack of complacency in that home. And I think that's how I'd like to sum our company up. We have a complete lack of complacency, and we are constantly striving to achieve the best that we can. Thanks, Randall.
Thanks for that, Ruth. That was some really interesting insights there, and it's great to share some of the your experiences and stories from the homes too. You touched on the past 12 months, which has obviously had a massive impact on the care sector with the pandemic. Is there any more you can say about some of the specific changes that you've made as a result of that in the last 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, I'll pick a couple of things. So one of the critical things for us has been about the way that we have supported our staff through this period. I've spoken quite a lot about relatives and the information we've given to them. But in terms of what we've done for staff, what I realised was they were very, very used to seeing us in and out of their homes. We're very present as a senior management team. And all of a sudden, we were in a position where it was not safe for us to do that. We would only go into the home if we had a very specific reason to be there. And staff were missing that contact. So quite early on in April, we learnt how to record a quick video and put it on a private YouTube link. Every week for many months, I would send out a little YouTube video to staff. I would do a separate one to relatives as well, to tell them what was going on from a government perspective, what was going on in terms of the world of care, any changes that they needed to be aware of, because we did put that information in writing, but we felt we needed to do something more. And I personally felt a real it was really painful not being able to go into the homes when it was something that was my bread and butter, and I wanted people to feel my physical presence in a different way. So that was quite an interesting experience for us. I don't still record videos for them on a weekly basis, but we got really good feedback. And in fact, when I went into a home last week, one of the kitchen assistants, who's a chap who and an absolute trooper, he said, "Oh, Ruth, it's so lovely to see you, because it makes me feel like the world is getting back to normal, and I've just got to tell you like how appreciated everything you did last year to keep us safe." He said, I read everything you wrote and sent to us, I watched the videos, it just made such a difference. So I'm really happy that we did that for staff, and we just innovated and did things a little bit differently. And then, as I said, taking that step to remove all of our quality assurance work online was massive for us, because it meant we had oversight of all of the home managers' audits. We had so much information at our fingertips, and it was a massive risk to introduce big new systems to our homes when we couldn't even go in and do that training face to face with them to teach them how to use it. But the risk paid off, and our systems have been so much more robust because of it.
Excellent. No, that's very interesting. Some very practical points there, I think. And just one final question, Ruth. As someone who's obviously had plenty of experience with taking on new homes, are there any particular challenges that you've had to overcome in terms of maintaining the standards at your existing homes, whilst at the same time trying to focus on turning around a new home that you've taken under your wing?
Yeah, it's tough, Randall. I won't pretend it isn't. I guess through the course of our acquisitions, we've tended to have a reasonable amount of bedding in time after each acquisition. So we've not yet been in the position where we've bought more than one home at a time, and we've not had at least anywhere between 6 months and 3 years to embed that new home. But that doesn't take away from the fact that when you are taking over a failing service with a troubled history, you need a lot of feet on the ground to get that sorted out and to understand what the problems are. And I think what we've always tried to do is to take all of our staff along with us on that journey. The most recent home that we took over was a second home that we'd bought in the same town, and that was actually really good for us, because there was a lot of good information going around about actually Stow Healthcare is a great employer to work for. You're really lucky they've taken over your home. So that kind of messaging was obviously really helpful for us as well. But all of our existing homes, the slice of the pie becomes slightly smaller, and we've had to learn how to support that more effectively by taking on more staff at head office. So they still have opportunity to see someone senior going around their home on a regular basis. It's just not me every week. It might be me every 2 or 3 weeks now.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that answers the question very well. So thank you very much for that, Ruth. And we'll now hear from Andy. Over to you, Andy.
Thanks very much, Randall. And thanks for that, Ruth. That was wonderful to listen to. And I think I'm going to pick up on some of those threads that you've spoken about as well. So Just to give you a little bit of background, my business is business coaching. And when people say, what's the concept of business coaching? The way I like to describe it is most people who start up a business in something they've got a core skill in. So people like a carpenter will start up a business in carpentry because they're good at cutting wood. And what happens is as the business grows, it becomes a different beast. It's actually, they're not cutting wood anymore. They're running this thing called a company. And in their apprenticeship, if you like, in learning how to cut wood, they'd have had 4 or 5 years training. They'd have been on the tools. They'd have been learning the job. They then go into running this thing called a business, and it's generally from sort of, from their skill level rather than they've had any training in running a business. So the kind of things that I've been asked to sort of pick the threads up on is getting the best out of your team, being an effective leader, and the good old one of customer service and who in the company is responsible for customer service. So this is going to be a bit of a whistle stop through all of those, if you like. So getting the best out of your team. Now, I think with all of this, in any business, there's always 3 stakeholders. I don't particularly like the term stakeholders, but I don't have a better one for it. So the 3 stakeholders is the person who owns the home. The person who owns the home, they're the shareholder. Why would they invest in it? They need to get a return from investment. So they need that. The second one is the customer. The customer is the person who decides whether or not you have a right in the workplace, in the marketplace at all. If they don't buy from you, the business has no place. But the third element of this, and perhaps the most crucial, and it's the one that gets overlooked by most people, is it's the team that you employ, because the team that you employ are the ones who are going to deliver the service. Now, with all of this, what we've got to understand is, why on earth do people who work for you, why do they work for you? They could choose to go anywhere, but they've chosen to work for you. And part of this is, as leaders, we need to understand what their motive is. Yeah, sure, most of them go for money, if you like. If I've often done this exercise and asked people, so why do you work at this particular place? And they go, oh, it's a lovely place. We like the people. It's a nice environment. It's convenient, etc., etc. But then if you say, so if they stopped paying you, would you still go in? And they say, oh, no. So what they actually want is they want money. Then you've got the point of, okay, so if I opened up a business next door paying twice as much and I offered them a contract, would they come and work for me? And often they say, yeah, of course I would, because it's more money. If I doubled their salary. But then I say it's a 1-month contract and they go, oh, no, I don't really want that. So what they boil it down to in the end is what an employee wants from a company is they want that sort of stability, that steadiness, to know that they've got a job going forward for a long time. They want the security that the business is doing well. And the only way the business can do well is if it satisfies the stakeholder, satisfies the customer, and looks after the team as well. So we need to understand why they're there. It's very, very important. So the next bit comes down to leadership. So in terms of being a carpenter, because we were good at cutting wood and we've had a lot of apprenticeship in it, how many of our leaders of businesses, the owners, the senior management team, have invested the same level of effort in actually training themselves to be a leader? So if you think about it, what makes a good leader? Now, often we all as leaders, we point to our team. And if you think through the team that you employ at the moment, and I said to you, if you were starting up another business tomorrow and you could take some of the employees that you have, but you had the chance of leaving others behind and then getting some new ones to fill those numbers, how many would you actually take with you? And which are the ones you're going to leave behind, and why is that? And this happens so often in business that we have employees, and the best one I ever had was when somebody said, well, look, you don't understand, you can't do anything about bad employees anymore. And one of the questions I asked, I said, well, okay, you kind of can, but they said, well, we inherited these employees. So I said, okay, who did you inherit them from? So they said, well, it was my parents' business. We took it over 20 years ago, and we inherited them with them. And I said, well, so, but you've still got some of these employees that you wouldn't actually take with you. So at some stage as leaders, we've got to step up, and we've got to say, okay, we need to get the right people for this organisation. This links back with what Ruth was saying quite well early on, which was every business should have a vision for what they're trying to achieve, and they should have the values of the business. Now, values is an interesting one because in my view, the values of a business comes from the leaders, the owners of the business at the top. Now, just because the owners have these particular values doesn't make them right or wrong. What it means is those are their values. And a business's job is to make sure that the employees that they have within that business actually share those values. We are not set up in business to change the values of employees, right? And the reason I say this, if you look at say our prisons are full of some characters who don't share some of society's accepted values. Now, the reoffend rate when people come out of prisons is generally quite high still. So if the prisons cannot correct somebody's values, in business, we're not set up to change people's values. So often their values are what their values are. So the job of a leader is to make sure that they have people within their organisation that share the business's values. To do that, we've got to understand exactly what our values are. We need to recruit based on values. We need to make sure that the interview process is actually making sure we're getting the right characters on board. The second thing is if we've got the right characters on board and they are not producing the results we want, where do we look for fixes? And generally what we've got to say is we've got to hold our hands up as leaders. I'll refer you, if any of you have ever watched the program called Super Nanny, where the children are misbehaving and Super Nanny comes in and all of a sudden, instantly the children behaved. So where did the problem lie? Did it lie with the children or did it lie with the leadership? And unfortunately, if we have people in our organisation who are not performing, who are not doing what we need them to do, we've got to look at ourselves as leaders and say, okay, what do we need to do differently to get the best out of these people? So in leadership, how much time do we actually put into educating ourselves, educating our leaders, actually making them, something that really, if you like, inspires people to follow? Because just being given the title of a leader, does it actually make you a leader? The definition of a leader is that other people are prepared to follow you. So what we need to be doing is we need to be creating an environment where we can actually have people there who want to follow the leadership. Very quickly, because huge subjects here, the other question that was asked of me to talk about was customer service and who's responsible for customer service. So part of this comes down to, and my favorite example is, give an example that we all know where we judge customer service. And generally, I always use restaurants as an example. So if you think about it, when you go to a restaurant, there's a process we go through. We start off and we actually look at, well, where are we going to go? We look online, we look up reviews, we asked our friends for recommendations, where are we going to go, etc., etc. We then decide we're going to book this restaurant. So we phone up and say, can I make a booking? How's that booking handled? Have you ever phoned a restaurant where somebody just picks up the phone and says, hello? And that's it. That's their greeting. That's the first interaction we've got with the particular business. Then you turn up outside and you actually see people smoking by the bins, or it looks untidy in the car park, or whatever. It starts giving us a vibe of what this business is actually like. We then go inside. How are we met? Are we actually greeted by somebody at the door? Do we go in? Do we stand there? Do we look, not knowing what to do? Do people make eye contact with us? Do they make us feel at ease? We're then going into this restaurant, and we actually, what's the service like at the bar? Did we have to wait 20 minutes? Did we, what did we feel the experience was like? How clean were the facilities when we used them? What was the food like? What was the service like? It goes on and on and on. Even when we go to the payment cycle at the end, how was the money collected? Put this back into terms of a care home. So all of those elements will actually be true. How do we decide which one we're going to? What's the reputation? What are the recommendations coming out? Who are all the people who are involved in giving that ambience in the whole care home? Is it, it is the cleaner, it is the gardener, it is the receptionist who takes the call, it is the people who are delivering the care, it is the person who's collecting the money. All of these interactions with your business is actually customer service. And it's actually thinking it from multiple points of view. Who is the customer in your care home? Is it the resident? Is it the child of the resident who's actually paying the bills and sorting things out? It's making sure that we deliver the service that we want to with the values that we have in the right way to make sure that everybody's happy. So, huge subject. Really apologies. That was a real whistle-stop tour, but I'll open it up for you there, Randall, for questions.
No, that's excellent, Andy. Do appreciate that, and as you say, it's a very big subject. But just picking up on the final point you were covering about customer service, we have a question here of when and how should we train new starters in relation to customer service?
Yeah. Okay. So I would say when has got to be absolutely straight away. If you take something like one of the most consistent businesses in the world, one of the biggest businesses in the world, it is McDonald's. It's a business that is run by teenagers and basically very young clientele. You get a job at McDonald's, you go to the McDonald's University for 2 weeks to learn how to do all their processes and behave and act. What you've got to understand is from day one that your employee is in the business, they're representing your company. That's part of your delivery of your service to your customers. So it's actually do it straight away. How you do it? Make sure you've got a rock solid induction system. What are all the things you want to make sure that they do? Make sure that they're living by the values. The trick in many respects in recruitment is if you recruit people with the values, you need less rules and sort of regulations of how you do business. You need to do it from a compliance point of view, but intuitively, people with the same values as you will intuitively do the right thing. But train them straight away, great induction system.
Brilliant. And what would you advise? I think you did kind of touch on this earlier, but what would you advise if you do have team members that aren't kind of fully on board with the changes that you'd be looking to make within the care home?
Okay. So, and this is always a tough one. If they're not on board because of they believe that we're wrong, we can change beliefs. We can actually reason with people to change beliefs. If they're not on board because they don't share the values, it doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means their values do not fit with our organisation. Unfortunately, and I think Ruth said it as well, there will be casualties. There will be, some people may have to exit the business. But your gut will tell you, if you were going to start a competitive business next door and you had the chance of leaving some of your employees behind, why would that be? What are you doing about it? Do you have them on an improvement plan? Do you have an action plan to get them on board? Or if not, make sure that we change them.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful.
That's a bit harsh, but necessary.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And just one final point or question. If there was one quality that you'd look for in a leader for someone to kind of work on themselves, if you like, what would that be?
I think, and once again, I think Ruth alluded to this as well. It's the open mind. It's the sponge sort of mentality of, can I take on extra things? Do I want to learn about leadership? You know, anybody who wants to be a leader, for example, how many books have they ever read on leadership? You know, because if the answer's none, are they serious in actually educating themselves as a leader? You wouldn't imagine going into the care home industry and not doing the examinations or doing the qualifications which allow you to do various activities in the home. But would you think about, do you do the same level of training on leadership? So somebody who's got a thirst and desire to learn that part of their job, unfortunately, there's kind of in industry a great book I like, and it's called Peter's Principle. And what it talks about is most people in most organisations get promoted to their level of incompetency. So basically, you've got 10 people in a particular group, the manager leaves, and we're going to promote somebody to be the manager. We tend to promote the person who's the best at the job below, and they may then become the title of manager. If they don't perform, we leave them there. We don't do anything about it. So actually, read up, you know, make sure you've got a sponge, be a sponge, and want to learn about leadership. Every leader, in my view, should be having lots of leadership training to keep themselves, even if it's just reading books themselves.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, that's excellent. Well, that does conclude everything for today. We will be sending around a recording to everyone after the event. Thank you, everyone, for watching the webinar today. We trust you found it interesting. Thank you also to Ruth and to Andy for your time. And we look forward to seeing everyone at the next webinar in the Celebrating Success series next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.